It has been so long since I last filmed a writing vlog, so welcome to another one. I have just been impromptu working on something and I wanted to just kind of document it because I'm just coming across something pretty cool, to be honest. So if you don't know anything about me, last year I wrote a novella called Body Back, and actually at the time of filming this, Body Back turned a year old just a couple of days ago. Now, at the time, I had no idea that writing Body Back was going to trigger an onslaught of new projects for me, and those new projects ended up being novellas. I really fell in love with the novella form in 2023. I pretty much spent the entire year really focused on that form, and I wrote 3 in 1 year. I wrote Body Back, I wrote Hallowed Bodies, and I wrote Changing States in 2023. Technically, I finished Changing States in January, but I wrote very negligible amount of it in 2024. So I just say that I wrote it in 2023. Now, all of those novellas are part of a series of novellas that are little companions to a series that is also a part of a larger series that I've been writing. So hello, welcome to the complicated world of my writing. If you are new to this channel, I will link a video that describes pretty much the entire series and how it came to be. I've really been focused and loving these novellas, but I didn't think I was gonna write any more past these 3. These 3 follow the major characters from the Mothwork duology. So Harrison's the narrator of Body Back, Harrison's ex-boyfriend who kind of caused all of these books to happen. His name is Lonan. His novella is Hallowed Bodies. And then the final novella that I was working on is called Changing States, that follows Jeremiah, who is Harrison's ex, who he ends up dating pretty briefly after breaking up with Lonan, and that also ends badly. I didn't think I was gonna write anymore because I was like, I kind of finished each character's major side quest. That's how I view novellas. The novella as a form is so interesting to me because it is not quite a short story, it's not quite a novel, and there's even other forms in between, like a novelette and everything. But as somebody who is writing a lot of very short fiction, who had a lot more experience with short stories under 3,000 words, and who had experience writing novels, finding a form that was right in the middle was so interesting because it finally helped me understand the difference between the size of ideas and what could be large enough to sustain a novella. So in October, I was kind of celebrating a funny date because one of Madonna's songs came out in October, I think October 18th, obviously in 2005, and that song and when it released was important to Jeremiah, who's the narrator in Changing States. It actually was kind of how I timelined Changing States. It was all revolving around that one song release date. I kind of want to write something that takes place on that day when that song came out. So on October 18th of 2005. So I ended up writing a random opening to what I thought would be a short story called Lost Gods. And this story follows Harrison, who a lot of you probably already know. I have a lot of videos explaining his various stories. I'll link the videos on Mothwork, Feeding Habits, and Body Back if you want a crash course, get some in-depth, get some popcorn analysis of those stories. And those are just personal novels that I wrote when I was a teenager. And so he's kind of my favorite person to write with. He also is the narrator of the AUs that I write. And so of course it just seemed apt that on that day I just wanted to write with him again. But this time I was writing at a different period of his life. So in Mothwork, we see Harrison really trying to help somebody, his boyfriend at the time. We see him really driven, and we see him being relatively, as much as he can, a good person. And then in Body Back, which comes after, we see the complete opposite. After the breakup, he kind of loses it and has a little bit of an emotional breakdown. And then in Feeding Habits, he's sort of at this dejected, bad person stage, if just to summarize it. And I wanted to explore the time that came after Body Back, especially because Body Back is such a glitzy story. It is so much happens in it in terms of kind of chaotic behavior, and I wanted to see the aftermath of it that is especially hinted at in Feeding Habits. In Feeding Habits, which I wrote in 2020 to 2022, mostly in 2020, I explored a lot of Harrison's mental health issues and how his mother was struggling to help him, and we didn't get to see that in Body Back because Body Back took place in a different city. It was at a different time. So that's kind of how Lost Gods came to be. Now, writing this book has been a complete non-issue in my process. It doesn't even feel like I've been writing a book because I kind of vowed to myself that I wouldn't approach this story, it's not a story anymore, the same way I did with the other novellas. Now, it's really important to note, and I feel like we as writers should talk about this more, like how kind of our life circumstances can dictate how we write a project and why we're writing a certain project. I started writing Body Back because I was going through a very emotionally difficult time. My mental health was struggling. It was not doing good. I was not doing good when I started writing Body Back. Hallowed Bodies as a project was just a sort of transitional phase for me. I had moved back to my home, which is across the country from like an apartment that I'd lived in for 2 years in a city that I'd gone to school in. I graduated, life changed a lot, and Hallowed Bodies was again something to cling to, but also to help me like reintegrate a writing routine. And then Changing States was just a project to enjoy. I think I had really kind of settled back into my life, and I took the writing processes for all three quite seriously. Body Back because I was coping, so I was constantly writing it. Hallowed Bodies because I was trying to regain like some semblance of a routine within my house, my writing routine at home. And then Changing States, I wanted to create a writing routine outside of the home. And I did a really good job with all three of those things, but because of that, the process was quite grueling. Like I was really like writing like at a full-time pace. It was a very high output of writing, especially for the genre and especially for what it required of me. And I had a lot of fun, but also like I didn't want to do that again necessarily with another story. And in comes Lost Gods. So immediately after writing Lost Gods, I think I wrote like the first page or so on October 18th of 2023. I had tried to make it like a project where like I take it very seriously and I'm going to the library and I'm getting chips and I'm getting a drink and I'm like chilling and really making like sort of a spectacle out of the process, because that's what I'd done with the other ones and that worked, especially particularly with Changing States. But I remember being at the library one day writing Lost Gods and just not feeling right. I think I had written at that point a couple scenes on my phone and that felt much better. And in any regard, it wasn't a project I was focusing on because I was still really writing Changing States. I was very full-time on Changing States. So I wasn't focusing on it very much. Then, of course, I finished Changing States in January. In the meantime, as I finished Changing States, I can't remember, sometime in January, I've just sort of been chilling with my projects. I've been writing short stories, but also I've been writing a lot of Lost Gods, and it's not really typical for my process. I love the Notes app. The Notes app is my best friend, and I have been writing in the Notes app, since the beginning of time. I think it's so fun. It's also so convenient. I have my notes linked up to iCloud, just like whatever free amount they give you, and so it's pretty easy to get onto my computer. And honestly, writing in my Notes app is what actually got me to write in my favorite point of view right now, which is third person present tense, and that's because anytime I write a note from about 2015, 2016, ever since I started writing down notes for my work, I've always written the notes in third person present tense. And so I just started drafting scenes in the Notes app for Lost Gods, and it would just be in random moments. Like I wrote one after I watched Saltburn. It was like late at night and I just wrote one quickly on my phone. I'll write one to try to make myself fall asleep. I'll write one when I'm on public transit, or I'll write one when I'm like walking home. A lot of the Notes app writing does happen late at night, especially when I'm about to go to bed. I just want to get down a couple of paragraphs. And the writing has just sort of been accumulating, and it's just chilling, and it's pretty fun. And something else that I started doing is writing by hand. Now, again, me and writing by hand go way back, and I've always notoriously said I don't like writing by hand. I feel like my writing isn't as good when I write by hand, and I think what I mean by that is it's not as easy to write polished prose on like the first go by hand. I find that my brain is a little bit more awkward when it comes to getting out sentences and images by hand, and I'm not really sure why. Maybe because on a computer you can easily backspace, so I don't notice how much I delete when I'm drafting, for example. But I made it a bit of a vow this year in 2024 to do more handwriting, because I'd started to do that with Changing States. Really, I wrote a big amount of Changing States, like the opening of it, by hand. I also finished Hallowed Bodies, like a good chunk of it also by hand, because it was just out of necessity. Like I didn't have access to my computer at the time. Like I was in the car, for example. I brought my mini notebook with me. I actually kind of found something nice about writing by hand, and the desire to get away from programs that focus a lot more on productivity, I think, was starting to get to me. Because Body Back, Hallowed Bodies, Changing States, I was so hyper aware of like word count and like how big the project was getting. Like I didn't want that anymore, especially, and it's not that it was like impacting me like super badly, but it was impacting me enough to bother me. And I mentioned this before, but I turned off my word count feature. I no longer have the word count feature on Word. I have to manually check it, so I can't constantly see how big the word count is. And actually, that has been profoundly helpful. Not long ago, literally in January, I ended up pulling out my notebook. This is my notebook. It's really cute. It looks like a paperback. And my brother for Christmas, thank God, like it was like as if he knew I wanted to start writing by hand, bought me some bougie pens from Muji, like the nice pens from Muji. And so with that, I was pretty prepared to start writing by hand. And I have not filled up like, a lot of it. Like, I don't know how I can... This is how much I filled up of this notebook, which it's a big notebook, so it's kind of a significant amount. Definitely like 15, 20 pages by hand. Maybe not that many, 15 maybe. I've written a couple poems in here, and most of all, I've written random scenes for Lost Gods in this notebook. It's literally just moments that some of them are chronological and some of them aren't, that are in this one notebook. And one thing about me is I'm an extremely chronological writer. I have always been a chronological writer. Part of it is I'm a pantser, so I really only know what happens next in a causal chain of plot when I am writing linearly. But because I wasn't really writing this project traditionally, and also because the project itself doesn't really have plot, not knowing what happened next didn't really matter. Now, this is the point of the video where I actually finally sit down and tell you what Lost Gods is about. I will read the logline for you. Content warning, there's mention of suicide. This project deals with that theme quite head on. All right, so this is the Lost Gods logline. Fielding the remains of 2 breakups and at the genesis of a new life in Manhattan, Harrison, alone for a week in the city, is ready to die until he meets an older artist whose intensity provides the distraction he needs. I actually have plot, like, surprise, like, I came up with a plot, sort of. I mean, this makes it sound like there's more plot than there actually is, and now that I kind of think of it, I actually think Lost Gods could kind of make a cool novel, because really, it just follows Harrison as he builds a relationship with several people, but at the center of it, someone who keeps recurring is an artist who is a little bit older than him, whose name is Augustus, and he primarily works with sculpture. It's kind of interesting to me how character details can sometimes seem like off, but ever since the beginning of pretty much time, when I started writing Fostered, which is the parent series, one detail always stayed the same, and it's that Harrison is a visual artist. And I always found that kind of like out of character. I was like, that doesn't seem like him at all. Like, I don't know why, but like he doesn't give creative. With that said, he's always been a visual artist. And so I thought, how interesting would it be for him to interact with another visual artist, and what would that kind of look like? And so Augustus kind of fully realized in my mind, like really quickly, in late 2023, and he has been at the center of most of the scenes that I write. Now, this is a really like kind of frank project. It's not like Body Back, which is like hiding emotionality kind of through like cringe, like angsty narratives or like quite glamorous prose. It's a little bit more pulled back. It's a little bit more honest. Because of that, it can be uncomfortable. It can be like really intense. But I've been really enjoying the difference between sort of like this maximalism in Body Back versus, I won't say minimalism because my prose is not minimalist, but for the sake of the argument, like the minimalism emotionally, I think, of Lost Gods, it's still a deeply, deeply, deeply complex project emotionally, but there's something stripped back, more vulnerable about it than Body Back, which kind of was a persona for this character. So I'm really happy about it, and the reason why I just decided to pick up the camera and film is because I was making a post on tumblr.com. And I realized a couple of things. So this project I've been saying is a short stories, and I was saying that all up until the end of 2023. And really, I only like changed my mind and was like, okay, let me accept my fate quite recently, because it was obvious to me that this was going to be much longer than a short story. And because I don't have like a rush to kind of like, oh, I want to finish it because I need to work on something else, it doesn't really matter how long it gets, because I'm just going to continue to write it until it sort of naturally feels like it comes to an end. Now, Lost Gods takes place over a week. It starts the week before Harrison's birthday, I think, which is the week before. I think his birthday in 2005 takes place on a Friday. So it's a Friday to Friday. And his mother, Susanna, who he's recently reconnected with after being abandoned by her in his childhood. Her name is Susanna. She has moved with him after the disastrous, pretty much, events in Body back to where they're both from in New York City. They actually end up moving to Manhattan, whereas they're from Brooklyn. Actually, that distinction between, you know, going to a familiar city but just not a part that they're as familiar with is explored in feeding habits. Susanna has to fly back to the West, where she lived for many years by herself in Las Vegas, which is where Body Back takes place, just to sort of sort out the ends of their move. And so Harrison ends up alone in the apartment. She's quite hesitant to leave him, but he's like, I'll be fine. He's turning 22 the next week. And honestly, I think he kind of wants to spend some time alone for, you know, the chaotic reasons that will continue in Lost Gods, but not in a chaotic way. I shouldn't even say that. It's just like pure, like, poor decision-making skills, you know, like there's no chaos involved in the decisions. There's just like, he definitively makes those decisions. And so I wanted it really just to be short. I was like, okay, 5,000 words, because at the time I was like, because like it's gonna interrupt me writing Changing States, and like I need to finish Changing States because I need to hurry and start my collection and everything. And then it didn't matter, because I finished Changing States, and also like I don't plan on rushing Lost Gods at all anymore. So that's when I decided, hey, it's a novella. Something that was kind of a wonderful realization for me is I've written most of it not on my computer. I am attached to my computer. I have been a huge laptop girly, like, since I got my first computer. Like, even before then, I was constantly using my mom's laptop. Like, I have loved the computer. I am Gen Z at heart, okay? Like, there's absolutely nothing. You can't take my computer away from me. I'm very attached to my laptop. And I've written everything on it, right? And so maybe it was because I did so much writing in 2023, and maybe it was because I was staring at a computer the whole time in the exact same setting, because my life had changed into a thing that was like the same every single day. I could not stand it. Like, writing Lost Gods on my computer just felt so wrong. I actually did the calculation. I wrote 1,600 words of this project on the actual computer, and it's actually 8,000 words long. So the goal was a 5,000 word book. It's currently 8,000 words, so it's literally getting to novella territory, if not novelette territory. And most of it I wrote either by hand or while I was like falling asleep, like on my phone. And I think there's like just something so beautiful about that. I've never written a project like this before, and I want to honor it somehow. I've been mentioning this, like, I kind of want to like print out the original like notes app, like in the notes app format too, and like bind them into a book, just because I think it would be fun. Like, not all the scenes are in the notes app, but I think it would be nice to see kind of the origin of a lot of these things. Now, the state of Lost Gods is a little bit complicated because, like I said, it's just scenes. Like, I'm not doing that much. Like, I am not piecing it together as a narrative. I'm not thinking of it chronologically. I'm not thinking of continuity. I'm not thinking of causal chains. It's just scenes. Like, any scene that interests me, I've been writing down. And actually, lately, the scenes have been interconnected. They're all sort of about Harrison, like, painting something, and, like, the aftermath of him painting something. But before then, they're just, like, they were not related at all. The scenes were just kind of random things I wanted to write. Today, finally, I streamed today, and on the stream, I started compiling everything into my document, mostly like for security purposes, so I don't lose them, because now I have backups of everything. That's how I ended up finding the word count. But what I did is, in my document, which I'm not planning on really writing it, I think what I want to do is like write as many scenes as possible elsewhere and then kind of stitch it together. I put everything as much as possible in chronological order, so then I can kind of like just fill in gaps. And I think that's kind of a cool prospect to me. It feels like a puzzle. I've never written anything like this before, and it's just really fun to play around, like, especially with a project that's just for me. This is just a project, and I kind of like, I hope this is encouraging. 8,000 words has just come to be because I let myself have fun in my notes app and in my notebook. And that's so cool. Like, this didn't exist before. And so if that's any encouragement, if you have been like on the fence of like, I don't know if I should start a project, I'm kind of scared to do it, like, just do it in your notes app. Like, that has made it such a fun, like, low stakes project. And I think really the only reason why I wrote more than like that first page of Lost Gods. So that is the video. That's the end of this vlog. I just wanted to kind of talk it through and just give you some behind the scenes of how a project kind of came to be. Let me know what you think. I'm really excited about Lost Gods. I'm not publishing it or anything, but like I said, I'm kind of curious about the characters, especially Augustus, this artist, and what his relationship means for Harrison. So let me know what you guys are working on, but thank you so much for watching in the meantime, and I will see you in another one. Bye.